Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. I'm your host, Seán Hussey, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by two sports journalists. First of all, I'd like to introduce Alanna Cunnane to the podcast. Alanna, how are you getting on?
Great, Seán. Thanks for having me on.
And also Luke Delaney. Luke, welcome.
Thank you, Seán. Buzzing to be here.
Well, we spoke on this podcast, and normally I'm alongside my brother Daniel about some grim nights in Irish football history with the men's side in particular, but it's so good to be speaking about such a positive event, the Irish women's side qualifying for the World Cup for the first time ever. Alanna, it was such a special night in Hampden Park, obviously. Just talk us through what's happened over the last 24, 48 hours, and has it really sunk in yet?
I don't think so, Seán. A lot of the players are saying it hasn't anyways. Now, I wasn't there myself. I was watching it on the TV, but even at that, I don't think you couldn't but be taken up by all the emotion of it. I think I watched the match, obviously, and then watched all the post-match stuff. And then I couldn't go to sleep for hours, when you're just that kind of wound up and, I don't know, the adrenaline and everything of the results. And I wasn't even there, never mind playing. So I actually can't imagine what it's like for them. Their first ever major tournament. And after all the hard work of this campaign, the disappointment having not made the Euros just gone. And then obviously, a lot of more kind of building blocks along the way. I'd say this is just as good as it gets. Their first major tournament, but hopefully not their last, Seán.
Yeah, and there was a clip doing the rounds before the game. I think RT put it into their coverage of the big nights in Irish football and history. And it did have all the hallmarks of that before the game, Luke, but for the team to go out and get over the line, considering conceding a penalty early, just to get over the line, especially in Hampden Park, a historic ground as it is against one of our nearest rivals. It's just the magnitude of the occasion is slowly starting to sink in, I suppose.
Yeah, and it was an amazing job, kind of like the way that they saw the game out. Like you'd often see a lot of teams when they do dominate the first half of games to maybe slide off slightly in the second half, especially when things aren't going your way. I know that there was definitely a couple of refereeing decisions which I thought were bizarre throughout the game. But to that change for Vera to be able to see that fresh legs up top, I think Heather Payne did an unbelievable job until she came off for Amber Barrett. But the way to grind out a game like that, especially having very little experience ever at a stage like that, and I think that was absolutely massive for the team. And it was a real gutsy performance, particularly in that last 10, 15 minutes. Thought the back three were absolutely superb. I think Niamh Fahey, Louise Quinn, they got their heads to absolutely everything. And I think when you're winning like that, when you're all playing together as a team, I think that's always going to be a good sign.
Well, what happened in the summer, Alanna, with the success of the Lionesses, and it was funny on the coverage during the summer that a lot of the Irish team were pundits on RTE, and they were talking about how great an occasion it was, and you could sense that there was just a desire to get there. Does that just add to it the achievement of itself as well? The fact that having missed the Euros to qualify for a World Cup even harder for those girls, it's just that extra incentive, if you like.
Yeah, I think so, Seán. But I think it's more than that too. This has been years in the making. Everyone's talking about the tracks and the jacks scandal of 2017, the subsequent strike, and then the raise in standards across the board. And then up until last year, the announcement, not only were they going to get paid, they were going to get equally paid to the men's international team. And I think all of that was important. And it didn't happen by an accident. This didn't just happen, I suppose, in the last 6 months to a year. This has been in the works for years. Your likes of your Emma Burns, Stephanie Roaches, Karen Duggins, and so on. And then to the appointments the FAI made, bringing in Vera and her backroom team. I just think it's all a culmination now coming together. And while that hurt would have played into it, definitely, there just seems to be something that has clicked as of late. And I think a bit of that too, I don't know, probably this time last year, if you remember, Vera had decided we were going to play multiple friendlies against better quality opposition now. And we lost quite a few of them, and quite a few in a row too. And I think, I don't know, was public sentiment what it was towards it, but it was kind of just okay, right, these are friendlies. If we start losing the actual games, who knows where it would have went. But that didn't happen. I think that major turning point was when we beat Australia in Tala 3-2. If you remember that was such a big night for Irish football. And even at a friendly, I think it really spurred on the whole World Cup qualification process then.
And just on the setup, Luke, you mentioned the back three. It was a 5-4-1, if you like. It was backs to the walls performance. We've kind of seen it in the past from the Irish men's side and the Jack Charlton era, but I suppose it doesn't matter how it looks on the pitch. It's kind of the results aspect of it.
That's it, absolutely. And I think one of the main things which comes through from this side, it's whoever comes in and whoever is kind of selected to play in that starting 11, they operate that role to a very, very high standard. It doesn't really matter. Like you saw Lily Ag coming in for Rusha Littlejohn, you'd lose very little there. And you have them kind of options all over the pitch. And I was amazed to see the level of performance, especially when you're missing, let's say, the likes of Leanne Kiernan, Jessica Zhu, and like I said, with Littlejohn as well, and to still be able to perform and kind of look like that you're not missing them. I think that's just a credit to how Vera sets the side up. So it's great. And I think a lot of that does come from maybe players experiencing new divisions, playing with different clubs. Like I was looking at the match day squad from the Scotland game. You have 7 players in that squad playing in the Women's Super League. You have another 8 in the Championship. You've got a couple then in America, a couple in Scotland, and then you have the likes of Barrett over in Germany. You've got Farley over in Serie A, and then with Kyra Kruse in Denmark as well. And I think that's only going to help the national team in the long run when you're playing against seasoned veteran internationals from all across the globe.
Yeah, I suppose we're very quick as Irish football fans to maybe give out about the FAI and question decisions, but you have to, as you touched on there a second ago, Alanna, the appointment of Vera Paul does seem to be a big turning point in this journey. And as Luke mentioned, a lot of the injuries that Ireland have had to deal with over the last 6 months or so, it's, people may look at it and say it was defensive football, but it was very effective football, and Vera Paul knew what she was doing. And even just using that sub of Amber Barrett to come on and win the game, it did feel like it was just such a tactical masterclass. It was timed to perfection.
Yeah, I think we've become quite used to this 5-4-1, really, Seán. We've kind of been enacting it for quite a while now, probably up until the guts of a year, so I think it's something that we've kind of acclimatized to at this stage, and we're really kind of getting into a groove with, because as you're saying there, the 3 at the back, Fahy, Quinn and Caldwell, they have near 300 caps between them. They're like interchangeable as well. We've had so many players become injured. Savannah McCarthy, for instance, used to be in that back 3 and seamlessly slips in and out, and hopefully we'll have her back soon. But as you say, like, that happens all over the pitch. We had Megan Connolly there, was a stakeholder in the midfield, and as Luke was saying, Rusha Littlejohn, and then Ag coming in there. O'Sullivan, of course, always staking her claim, and I think she's kind of testament to how that system is working, because let's say the other day she didn't score a goal like she has many times in the latest campaign there, but she was doing so much work that I think went a bit unrecognised. I heard some talk afterwards that, she mightn't have had the best of games. But if you watch it back, I suppose not only did she have that assist to play in Amber Barrett, she was doing a lot of the dogged defensive work. If Fahy or Quinn pushed up on someone, she was there coming at it from the other side and, really just squeezing Scotland and trying to get the ball off them at every opportunity. So, yeah, I think really it's just testament to where Irish football is at the minute, that while we have such strength and they're playing at all corners of the globe nearly at this stage as well, there's that bit of youth coming up through the Women's National League as well.
It's funny there because Katie McCabe spoke, Luke, in a post-game interview about we love defending. It's part of their identity. Vera Paul seems to have installed this in the side. Alanna mentioned the work of Denise O'Sullivan, but the fact that Ireland still have the quality in the pass from Denise O'Sullivan for Amber Barrett's goal, Katie McCabe whipped in a brilliant ball that O'Neill Gorman really should have scored from. So with the coupled of the defensive hard work, there's real quality going forward as well, and it's shown with the likes of McCabe and O'Sullivan that Vera Paul can get them to do the defensive work as well.
Yeah, and I suppose you're not going to mind doing that defensive work when you see you are reaping the rewards at the end of the day. I suppose a lot of the time, and even in that game against Scotland, you are probably defending for 60% of the time, but it's about maybe that another 30-40% of the time it's making it count when you are going forward. And I think that's just like Alanna was saying, it does go back to Vera Paul, and it is testament to her that they are playing her way because they do see her vision and where she wants the team to go. And like I said there, it's a results driven business, and when you're getting the results, there's no point changing anything.
I suppose that the whole magnificentness of the night was around Amber Barrett's winner, and then I suppose the touching fact that she herself's from Donegal. Her grandfather was from Creasla, her late grandfather, and it just had that feel of a moment in time that I think a lot of Irish sporting fans will never forget, not just for the goal, but for the scenes afterwards, Alanna.
Yeah, definitely. I saw a piece today, I think it was by Joanna Reardon. It was saying, this is our Italian 90. And I think it really is, because it's been such an awakening. While a lot of us have known about this and the special nature of the Irish women's national team for some time now, I think this has kind of awoken it in public consciousness, if that's kind of fair to say. And acts like that only kind of cement that further, to not only have the composure to slot away the goal when she knew she was basically, you couldn't miss it, to do that and then have the empathy and compassion to settle herself and pay tribute, as you said, to the Creasla victims. It's just remarkable. And I think that's the mark of a true role model, if you ask me. And she's not the only one in that team. I think anyone in that squad could be dubbed with that nickname.
And also the post-match interview as well, Luke, and also nearly all the post-match interviews were as good as each other, and that were on RT. And then there's a lot of great articles out there and interviews with other radio stations. It feels like this side are really showing their character now. And as Alanna mentioned, a lot of the core Irish women's football fans will have known about this team for a long time. It's really pushed themselves into the Irish sport and sphere a lot more, and qualifying for a World Cup does that in any sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really have captured the hearts of the nation. I think that really is safe to say. And even as someone who's watched football for a seriously long time, and similarly to you, like, you've never ever seen an Irish team in a football in a World Cup final. I was too young to remember 2002. And I think whether you're more into the men's side of the game or the women's side of it, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be watching Ireland represent their country at a World Cup next year. And I think it really just does show the character of the side. And like, all of them players, they would have probably grown up dreaming of this, and up to probably a couple of years ago, like, you would have never thought that you get this far. And I think it is, like I said earlier, it's testament to them, the backroom staff, and I think everybody's supporting it as well, though.
Did you fear the worst, Alanna, when on 13 minutes a penalty was given? Because I know I did, and Niamh Fahey was adjudged to have handled the ball. Did you think, oh no, it's going to be another one of those nights? We saw it with the Ireland under-21s, that quite a typical Irish performance. We got so close maybe and not quite get over the line. But Courtney Brosnan's penalty save did seem to change the whole complexion of the game, even so early into it.
Yeah, and again, that shows the growth that's been in this team, because up until as recently as 6 months ago, there was calls for maybe Brosnan not to be the number one. And I think she would have been my player of the match, to be honest, because not only did she have that penalty save, if you noticed, there was quite a few times during the 90 minutes, and then especially the 6 minutes added on, she knew, and she had that calm head to know when to, okay, let's reset here. She'd take a minute, she'd dive down on the ball. She'd, especially, I think, when she got that injury and she took a few minutes, and you were kind of going, oh, I don't really know, I hope you're all right, but get up now soon. But if you notice, that's when the Irish girls kind of reset. Scotland were getting in on top of us a little bit. They had that team talk. So I think that shows, the level of just calm and assured nature, that she knew, what to do and when to make those calls, I guess. And the penalty save as well was just phenomenal. And if that went in, who knows, it could have went a different way. So I think we owe a lot to Courtney Brosnan.
It did feel like that penalty save that as soon as I saw it, the first thing I thought about was, even though I wasn't born for it, was Packy Bonner's save. It does feel like that penalty save, and considering the result as well, it will be etched into Irish history. I think, Luke, we've obviously always been blessed in Ireland in the men's side, particularly with brilliant goalkeepers, and the women's side with Emma Byrne. I was actually listening to Emma Byrne talking about Courtney Brosnan, and she was talking about her critics, and she admitted to being one of her biggest critics at times. But it was just such a brilliant penalty save, and as Alanna mentioned, it was her overall performance that a lot of people thought, well, she was the player of the match.
Yeah, and I'd actually agree with that. And there's one thing which maybe wouldn't get as much of the accolades, but it was very late on, and when she won the free kick in the box, and it was some top level shithousery from Courtney Brosnan. She took the free out of the hands, and like Stephanie Roach was on commentary, and she just hit the nail on the head. Like, she did definitely know what she was doing. And it's small things like that which make such a huge difference when you're there running around as one of the 10 outfield players there, and you do need a break and you want to stop kind of defending. When you can kill off a couple of minutes like that so late in a game with such high magnitude like it was, like I think it was fantastic. And hopefully we'll see a lot more of that from Courtney Brosnan over the next while.
Do you think Ireland unsettled Scotland, Alanna? I know we went out to frustrate them, but even if you look at Megan Campbell's long throws, it just felt like Scotland were panicking a lot. And it did feel like Ireland got under their skin and really frustrated them as best we could.
I think so. I think Scotland somewhat actually underestimated Ireland. I think they came off the back of the Austria game, having won it in extra time with lots of confidence, and probably would have looked at the rankings no more than everybody else. In fairness to them, you wouldn't begrudge them that. We were one of the lowest rankings, I suppose, to make it through. But I'd say they would have kind of been weighing up those factors, as well as the injuries that, Luke mentioned earlier. And kind of thinking that this was theirs, because every other playoff game on that night, all the home sides won. The only outlier there was Ireland away in Hampden Park. So I think that kind of says it all, really, the advantage that gave them. And you would have thought we would have had it having won our earlier game. But anyways, I think, Ireland did really well to unsettle them too. We play very well, as you know, in the low block. We done it against Sweden away, Finland away, and those were big results for Ireland. So we kind of just enacted that again and hit them on the break, and it worked out once again.
There's obviously the excitement now of a World Cup, but I'm sure Vera Power in the back of her mind will be thinking there is a lot of work to do now between now and the summer. Luke, just on it, I know a lot of people, it's funny with it being in Australia and New Zealand, there's a huge amount of Irish people over there already. I'm sure there's a lot of Irish people living in Australia and New Zealand getting inundated with requests for beds during next summer. But it does feel like that this has to be the start as well, that Ireland can kick on now, because it's going to be another level playing in a World Cup. I think the draw is next week sometime. We're going to find out who we're playing. We could easily get one of the top seeds, maybe in England or in America, which is just another level. So it is exciting times, but also the back of Vera Power's mind, I'm sure she'll be looking to get the squad back in again and kind of build towards that World Cup now that we're qualified.
100%. Like Vera and the squad aren't going to be going over there to make up the numbers. We've seen it kind of in a lot of the qualifying campaigns, especially with Sweden. How like we were playing with no fear. We were quite unlucky in a couple of games against some of the big teams in the past, but they're certainly going to be going there, and they're going to be going, and they'll want to have made improvements from this qualifying campaign. I think the players are only going to take themselves to another level with kind of continuously playing football at their clubs. And I think it's going to be great, and I can't see us kind of going down there and just sitting back making up the numbers. I think she's gonna really go for it, whether it is us kind of defending for the 80 minutes of the game and hitting them on a counter in the last 10 minutes. I don't mind if that works, especially if we get someone like in England or something. You'd happily do that. But I also think that the attraction of playing against one of them big sides, and we saw a lot of them during the Euros, I think you do want to be playing them. It'll make the occasion better for you, to a chance to be playing at a World Cup against the likes of a Spain or an England, and it's only going to take your own game to another level.
Yeah, I'll just call out the teams in pot one. Obviously, for the draw, I think it's on the 22nd of October. We've got Australia, New Zealand as the co-host there, and there the United States defending champion Sweden, who Ireland have seen before, Germany as well. England and the Lionesses, obviously the holders of the Euros, France and Spain. Alanna, if you're looking at that, kind of thinking, what way are you thinking now that you can look forward to a World Cup? Do you think give me America and give me England, or are you kind of thinking, well, there could be an easier option there for us?
I think we'd take them at this stage, honestly, because we do play really well against these sides. I mentioned the Australia game earlier. They were second ranked in the world when we took them on that time and won. And Sweden as well are quite up those rankings. Obviously, as you say, they are tough. It's going to be tough regardless. But I think another factor that plays into Ireland's hands is obviously the UEFA or Europe is kind of the hardest confederation to qualify out of. And we've done so. So you'd imagine that we should have one or two kind of so-called easier games within the group regardless. And even at that, even just today it was announced that we've moved up to 24th position in the rankings, which is a new record, having previously only set a new record back in, I think it was sometime last year, we were 26th then. So they've continuously shown they're capable of smashing their own kind of place in those rankings. And I've no doubt they'll do it again now come next summer.
Yeah, Ireland are in pot 3 as it stands, with the likes of the Netherlands, who we've seen in the Euros. You got Brazil, Italy in there in pot 2. So there's some options for Ireland that they could get a group of death, or they could, as Alanna say, maybe take on one of the big teams and maybe get a result. Maybe look at the ripple effect of qualifying, Luke, and a lot has been spoken about in the last couple of days about the legacy that this could leave, and the fact that this Irish side are standing on the shoulders of those that have gone before them. There's obviously a lot of people who come out on Twitter saying that clubs have been inundated with messages about academy and where teams and where clubs or where people can join clubs. Do you think this is going to have one of those lasting effects that maybe we've seen in the GA in recent years with the attendances in Croke Parks at All Ireland finals? Do you think it's going to be one of those days that we could look back on in 4 or 5 years' time and see as a huge day for women's sport?
You know, I really hope so. And it's something that I really think will happen. Like, we're continuing to see the Women's National League grow, and it's growing at I think a very good rate and consistent now. Like, we see Shamrock Rovers now coming in with Collie O'Neill managing next year. We've Galway secured, and Cork as well. There was a huge announcement during the week that they're continuing their plans with the women's team, and I think it is going to be something that it's going to need to work. But if you're a young girl growing up now and you have these heroes to look up to, it's only going to increase the numbers, increase the urge to play, and playing at a competitive level as well. And I really don't think it's kind of out of line to say, why can't we make the Women's National League like one of Europe's elite inside the next 10 or 12 years? Like, you see the players we're producing that have been kind of playing in the league up until the last year and before going over abroad. And I think it's something that's going to, with the right investment and with the right coverage in the media and everything, and I think everything has to kind of weigh in together and everyone has to pull their own strings. But it's something that I hope will really help kick the sport on. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, like what you said, what the ripple effect of the qualifying will be.
And as we mentioned earlier, the FAI have done a lot of good work there, and there is a lot of people out there that hope that any sort of prize funds that come this way can be directed towards the Women's National League. Just on a more overall question, Alanna, I know this term gets used a lot about a golden age or a golden generation, but if you look at the Irish women's sports stars that are out there now, household names, that it does feel like a golden age. You look at the likes of, obviously, the year Rachel Blackmore's had the last 12, 18 months. You've got Leona Maguire, who made her breakthrough win on the LPGA Tour and was the star rookie in the Solheim Cup win. You've got Katie Taylor, Kelly Harrington's success. We've got, obviously, success in rowing. Katie McCabe's now playing for an Arsenal side in the Champions League, and Arsenal now, after last year's disappointment in the WSL, should be really kicking on and winning it this year. It does feel like we have household names and names that are at the top of their sport in Irish women's sport.
We definitely do, Seán, and that's come at such a good time, I guess, as well, because ever since 20 by 20, I guess, kind of only started the conversation, but it really kind of ignited it in people's minds, I think, and it's pushed on from there. The one thing I would say is we're probably yet to see a proper reflection of that in the media. The sponsorship now, we're seeing the lucrative nature in it as of late, even just like with Sky sponsorship of the women's national team. You saw how successful Lidl's sponsorship of LGFA has been over the years, and it's paying dividends for them now because women's sports fans, if you look at the research, tend to kind of feed back into those who support what they support. So it works out for them that way. So yeah, definitely there's an endless amount of Irish women's sports people, whether that be in football, Gaelic football, rowing, golf, you name it. There's someone there now to represent that corner of women's sport.
Well, we'll go back to the Women's National League, and it's kind of exciting times. There's a lot going on, another tight title race even after last year as well. Collie O'Neill next year, and Collie O'Neill, former UCD manager, has done a lot of great work there in UCD. A lot of really talented footballers have come through his hands. So, and obviously an exciting move that one of Ireland's premier clubs in the men's game are going to be joining the Women's National League ranks next year as it stands. But there are obviously a lot of issues, and as Alanna said, Luke, there is a lot more that can be done, a lot more to promote the sport. There was a bit of controversy last month or so when the cup final was announced, and obviously Shelbourne and Athlone, I think it's on the 6th of November, and it's going to be clashing with the last day of the men's Premier Division, and obviously Shelbourne fans that are as probably good a set of fans as we have in this country are really disappointed with that clash. Maybe you might talk about it, and again, these are the small steps that ultimately are big ones, a big step forward that we need to find and solve.
Yeah, Sean, and I think you said it there. There seems to continuously be something nearly like you're taking a couple of steps forward and then you're taking them back, and these are things that really can't be avoided. The scheduling of games, especially a match as big as the FAI Cup final, I think there's stuff that you can really get around. There's no reason why you couldn't shuffle them a couple of days, and you're just blocking the support. Shells, like you said, that they're a very hugely supported side, and now that you're going to have to be kind of choosing who you're going to be watching, and it's stuff that is just kind of going to impact on the women's side of the game more than anything, and you're going to stop it progressing at the rate that it probably would be if it wasn't happening, and the rate that it really should be.
I know you mentioned there about media, Alanna. Obviously, TG Carr have come on board in the last couple of years or so. It's funny, they haven't announced their televised fixture for the last game of the season. That's how tight the title race is, especially after last year and the success Shells had in the last day. Do you feel with how tight a league and again how competitive it is that maybe it should be more in the public domain?
Yeah, and I think things like you mentioned, the last day of the season last year kind of spurred that on again. Last year, as you might know, I'd say this is why TG Carr are reluctant to pick two horses yet, because last year they were in Peamount with the Cup ready to go there, and the Cup had to be driven over to Tulka Park. So I don't know what they're going to do this year with Athlone, Shells, Peamount and Wexford. They're going to need a helicopter or something, because it could literally be going anywhere just yet. I think what TG Carr have done is immense, whether that be, as we're talking about there, for the football or Gaelic football, for women's sport. And I think the Women's National League has come on leaps and bounds, especially in the last year or two, I think, be it from fan support, but as well with FAI kind of investment. And I hope that continues. You know, there's sort of rumours floating around at the minute that maybe in the coming years things are going to turn semi-pro. I think that'd be a great move if it were to happen sooner rather than later, because like we mentioned earlier with the women's national team, while there will be such a boost now, there is such a pressure on those girls to go abroad and be playing professional football, let's say in the WSL or the Championship or any of the leagues across Europe or America. You know, Vera Pauw is kind of no more than Stephen Kenny pushing these players to push their own levels and go out and play at that level. So I do hope that doesn't result in too much of a gulf between the Women's National League and the WSL, because there is such talent in the WNL. I'm the number one advocate. I'm not saying anything against it at all, but I'm just hoping that the positive trajectory that it is on continues over the coming years.
I'm sure someone in the FAI might have to find John Delaney's old helicopter for the potential trophy on the final day of the season. But you mentioned a point there, and it's similar to the Men's League of Ireland, and I heard Vera Pauw talking about in the past that clubs, if you are to say a Peamount are to produce a player that goes on to play in the WSL, there's very little to no compensation for a player moving for a club. We've seen that in the League of Ireland this year as well, in the men's side, with players moving, the likes of Dawson Devoy, Dara Burns, and there's huge issues around that. So there is a sense for these clubs, Luke, the likes of Peamount, the likes of UCD Waves, if they are producing players to go to the WSL, well, they're not getting financially rewarded as well, and maybe semi-pro is a step towards that as well. But as Vera Pauw mentioned, it's a similar problem they have in the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, and you're always going to have that kind of temptation to go and play for one of them big teams. But I think the Irish side, you do need that security, like you said there, with the likes of Devoy and Burns, and obviously Danny Mandroyu going for €30,000 over to Lincoln when he's been one of the standout players in the league over the past 3 seasons. It's something that's going to have to be addressed, I think, kind of on a league level, considering the amount of clubs that are being affected by it. It's not literally one or two of the smaller clubs that are kind of getting nearly bullied into selling, but it's something that I think that if the clubs did go semi-pro in the Women's National League, it would help with that security, and I think it would also give maybe a bit more of an excitement of playing in the Women's National League as well, and you're not going to have everyone being tempted with a move across the water or a big money move to Europe or something. But it's something that will only help. But I think it's going to have to be something that's addressed by the FAI and in the League of Ireland and the Women's National League itself, and as a league as a whole.
I think as well, though, Luke, like it's kind of a funny one, because even if you look at Chloe Mustaki, who obviously has been in headlines for different reasons, but has handled herself unbelievably well over the last few days, she came out and said that, you know, she was working a full-time job over here in Ireland while she was playing for Shells, and she halved her salary to go and play over in England to play professional football. So there is that bit of sacrifice no matter where you go still in women's football. Which is a shame, but as you say, hopefully that's kind of rectified in the coming years.
You mentioned Chloe Mustaki. We actually had her on this podcast maybe a year or so ago, and I suppose the Irish women's side were trusted into the news after the night in Hampden Park, maybe for all the wrong reasons, and be remiss not to mention it. Obviously, there was a video from the changing room, the victorious changing room of an Irish side, singing a song, a rebel song. I'm sure many people have seen it. We won't go into too much detail on it. Just on it, Luke, I suppose, without delving too far away from the result on the pitch, but there was obviously a huge amount of public opinion on it. Every radio station you turned on, people were talking about it. It was big news after such a big event. That's the limelight now that these Irish women players will be in because of their successes. They're now role models to more people now, that more people can see what they've achieved, and it was just a lapse in judgment, and they have come out and apologized.
Yeah, you said it there. Like, that's how Chloe described it on Sky Sports News, as a lapse in judgment, and it's a difficult one. You've seen it. Like, I suppose emotions are high. You're in a position which I suppose you never would have thought you're going to be in. I think they did the right thing with that apology kind of as soon as it happened, and it comes again from maybe not seeing the type of limelight that you are in. Like, these players now, they are role models. They're some of the biggest sporting stars in the country, and I think that's going to take some getting used to for them as well. But obviously you didn't want it to take away from the fantastic historic result that it was, and sadly it did kind of hamper it a little bit, but I think it only kind of hampers it as much as you want to look into it. And you got to remember these girls for the efforts that they've put in over the past number of years, and especially in this qualifying campaign. And when you look back on this moment, you want it to be remembered about Amber Barrett's finish and Courtney Brosnan's penalty save, rather than what happened in them couple of moments of madness after the final whistle.
Yeah, and Alanna, obviously the Irish side, I'm sure, will be really disappointed with the sour taste is left in some people's mouths, and obviously the fact that it was such big news. And I think that's probably something that they probably wouldn't have anticipated, the scale of their achievement. But as a result, with what they've achieved, you are seen differently in the public. You are role models, and as Chloe Mustaki did come out and say, it was a total lapse in judgment.
Yeah, I think they all deserve incredible plaudits for how they handled it with such respect, especially obviously the FAI statement, as Luke mentioned, immediately almost. That was a very good call not to kind of let it fester. Then Vera Pauw's apology, I think everyone could sense how sincere it was. You know, she was saying there was no excuses while it shouldn't have been put on social media in the first place. It doesn't matter that it was, it's the fact that it actually happened. So she was saying that kind of goes against their team ethos of respect for everybody, whether that be, I don't know, fellow people in the changing room or anyone they interact with in the hotel or fans or the wider public. So I think, yeah, they've come out and apologised for it. The FAI, Vera and the players came across very sincere in doing so. So I think that should be the end of it. But as you mentioned, with success comes more scrutiny, and I'm sure they'll take that as a lesson going forward. But as we had touched on earlier in the podcast, I think there's such unbelievable role models in that squad who have done like an outnumbering, greatly positive amount of work. that I think that's what should really be highlighted more than anything else.
Yeah, and those maybe who haven't heard, UEFA have launched their own investigation, which does seem a little bit rich considering some of the issues that are involved around UEFA and FIFA. But I'm sure we'll hear more on that. Maybe just go back to Vera, Paul, because it's an interesting point, and I was thinking about it that I suppose as we said, we're three people in our 20s. We never grew up in the Jack Charlton era, but you watch documentaries, you read books. On Vera, Paul, she does seem to have this aura, Luke, and even how she dealt with having to come out and apologize and her stance on it and saying no, it was totally wrong. She does seem to have that kind of aura and the public are taken to her, and she's having an effect that, if Ireland are to have a successful World Cup, she is starting to get put in that category of some of the great Irish sporting people, particularly those that have come into Ireland like a Jack Charlton and become almost Irish citizens, if you like, and also the way with how she dealt with coming out so personally in July, talking about some abuse she's dealt with in the past. She does seem to have that real likability to her, and again, I think she earned a lot of plaudits with coming out and apologising the way she did.
I think everything that she kind of does, she just oozes class. She's got everything that you want for a figure of the national team to be. She's completely immersed herself kind of in everything to do with Ireland. I think she'd probably nearly call herself an adopted Irish woman, nearly. But I think she's absolutely fantastic. If you look at kind of the football side of things, she very rarely gets her tactics wrong, picking players. And I think her style of management is fantastic as well. It's keeping 20 to 30 players still buying in, even though they mightn't be playing every week with the side. And it's giving them substitutes kind of the dream, like, oh, I'm going to be going to this World Cup anyway, even if it's just me coming off the bench for 5 or 10 minutes. And I think that's that player management, which is huge in this day and age. And she really does have everything that you want from a national team manager. And I think we got a real coup in getting her in, and when we did get her, because I think the timing was absolutely perfect, and everything she does is kind of in the same plans. I think it's what the FAI want, and I think as all Irish football fans want as well.
She's almost like, if you look at the English Lionesses during the summer and the effect that Serena Wiegmann's had on that group, and even the way she deals with the media and how she comes out and the way her side play and act, it's almost a similar effect to that of what Vera Pauw's had in this Irish side, Alanna.
Yeah, and maybe there's a rivalry to come there yet, as you say, Seán, if we draw them in the World Cup. But definitely, I just agree with everything Luke touched on there. I think as well, what has really been noticeable to me in the last few years of watching this Irish squad is how their S&C has kind of come on. If you notice, we're not getting pushed off the ball anymore. We're very much, I suppose, willing to be dragged into kind of a more physical battle. And that comes from playing at those higher levels, like she's encouraging everybody to do. She also encourages them to play with boys teams when they can, to get that extra level of physicality. And that's all led to, as Luke's saying there, both squad buy-in, but also competition for places, because not everyone that was playing in that window just there, let's say, will be playing for us in the World Cup. And that's both an unfortunate factor for some of those players, but also kind of reflects where we are as a nation, footballing wise, that there is that much competition for the squad. And while you're saying there, she does kind of have this aura about her, she does also have that ruthless nature to pick who she thinks will be best and will come good the time of the World Cup, be it next time.
I thought Amber Barrett's answer when Antonio Dunne say, are you going to be on the plane, and kind of saying, well, I hope so. If Vera wants to win the World Cup, she better have me. Going ahead to that World Cup, Alanna, England played USA in a huge friendly in Wembley. It was a big occasion. Obviously, USA missing a couple of players. I don't know, Alex Morgan wasn't there. England without their captain, Leah Williamson, and a few other injuries. They won 2-1 on the night. Who would you make as favourites going into that World Cup? Because the USA have done it in World Cups before, the defending champions. I think the one before it as well. England obviously broken their international duck during the summer and have this feel-good factory, and with the money and the structures that are in place and the coaching in the WSL, they seem to be coming along nicely with some of their younger players as well. Where is it between them two? And I know Germany, I'm sure, will have something to say, especially getting so close in the Euros this time as well.
Yeah, Sean, it's interesting those rankings we touched on earlier where I was saying Ireland moved up to 24th. England are currently only 4th in the world rankings. That's behind USA #1, Sweden, and then Germany. So, yeah, they're the ones to be looking out for. I guess the one thing I would pit in England's favour for the World Cup is USA, France, and Spain all have a lot going on off the pitch in their organisations, which is unfortunate that it would take away from their football ambitions. But I do think that kind of will have a bit of an effect, be it whether it be the players themselves or kind of just the scrutiny and the media frenzy over it off the pitch. So, yeah, I think England are in a really good position. Just there the other day, they drew against the Czech Republic, which I believe brought to an end a 15-game winning streak. Now, they're still are maintaining their unbeaten streak. They're 24 games unbeaten under Serena Wigman. That's her entire reign as manager, which is just like mind-blowing. But yeah, I think for anyone, if anyone is to prove they're going to stick it out in front of England, we'll have to wait and see because there's no one coming to the forefront just yet.
Looking to the World Cup, Luke, I know there's, as I said, a lot of people booking flights already. There is potential that Ireland do meet in England or in America. Some of the stadiums, Eden Park, the world famous Eden Park, is going to be used as the stadium in Australia, 83,000 in Sydney. Like, would you prefer to have one of those landmark games for Ireland, one of those playing in England, playing in America, that the whole country seems to get behind? Because these games, I think, are going to be played early in the morning on going on Australia and New Zealand time. So it does feel like something like almost a British and Irish Lions where everyone's waking up, getting excited for it. And do you want one of those big games, one of those marquee ones?
I think so, because I think you're in there because you are one of the world's elite. You want to be playing against them. If you are going to go far, you're going to have to come up against them at some stage. And I'd be a big man for the occasions. I love the big games. When you see yourself getting drawn against some of the world's best, like, it only adds to the atmosphere, to the emotion of the game. And like, could you imagine the crowds over in Sydney or whatever if we had England there, and whether it be in a group stage or a knockout, knockout stage if we got there, and the crowds that would be there. You'd have everybody waking up here, going straight down to the boozer at about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then you'd have everywhere in Sydney absolutely packed. And I think you want at least one of the big teams over there. And I think, like, obviously it was before our time and everything, but you had Italia 90 and you're playing against England, and then you were getting your results against Romania and all. Obviously Italy didn't go well or whatever, but they're the ones that do stick out in history. And you maybe don't perhaps remember your smaller games against the smaller teams, but you'll always remember the big occasions.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have a Saipan incident. Alanna, obviously the draws on the 22nd. Have you getting your flights ready or asking any favours? Are you hoping to get over there?
Yeah, I'll put out my plea now, Sean. If anyone wants to bring me to the World Cup, you're welcome to do so. No, I don't know about you. I looked up the flights. It's about $1,000 to go over, and obviously it'll be the same back. And then if you're incorporating it all in, I don't know how I'm going to afford it. I could be heading up to credit union just yet, but I think it's going to be an unmissable occasion, whether you be over there or, as Luke was saying, waking up at all hours this side of the world. I think I'm hoping there will be a bit of World Cup fever about it. You know, everyone get the sticker packs out and the tournament wall poster up, and everyone get into it, because like we're saying there, we've never had our generation have never had an experience like this, so hopefully it'll be one to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look forward to that draw and look forward to bringing you more episodes on the Tackling Sport podcast. Delighted to have had Alanna Cunnane on today. Thanks very much for joining us, Alanna.
Thanks, Sean.
And also to Luke Delaney.
Sean, thank you so much for having me on.
You can catch them both on Twitter. We'll leave their ats in the description below. Thanks very much for watching. And as Alanna said, our generation have never had a World Cup to look forward to. So here's hoping we have our own Italia 90 moments like you see on Reeling in the Years in the pubs. And Ireland get a good draw, and we're looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to the World Cup. So from all of us here on Tackling Sport, thanks for listening, and see you again.